Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video is going to cover the mysterious death of Dennis Wilson, the drummer for the Beach Boys. You remember the Beach Boys. The Beach Boys began as a garage band in Hawthorne, California. Hawthorne, California is about 9.5 miles away from Culver City. You know, where the Anheuser fiery car crash never happened. You know, where MGM had a film studio where they signed Sharon Tate to a 7-year contract, which she refused to renew in 1969, and then she got whacked. It's about 9.5 miles from that building, which is now Sony Pictures Studios. It's about 9 miles to the Harvey Levin TMZ, which it's not a TMZ studio, it's another company's studio that allows the Fox owned TMZ fake news station to do whatever it is that they do over there. Anyway, so Hawthorne, California garage band. The original cast members of the Beach Boys were, of course, Brian Wilson and his brother Carl and his younger brother Dennis. And they were joined by their cousin, Mike Love, who was the eldest of all the Beach Boys. And also they were included Al Jardine, who was a close friend of the brothers Wilson. So those 5 young men in high school created what is called the Pendletones. The Pendletones, and they wrote and produced a song entitled "Surfin'." After they had been rehearsing and covering other people's music, Everly Brothers, etc., they produced a song called "Surfin'." And Murray and Audrey Neva were the parents of the Wilson brothers, Brian, Carl, and Dennis. And Murray asserted himself as the manager of his boys, who were using his garage to record this. So Murray, had some contacts over Hollywood way, and he eventually found a Herb Newman, who represented Candix Records in Hollywood, and Herb arranged for a recording session at a place called the World Pacific Studio in Hollywood, where on September 15th, 1961, the Pendletones performed "Surfin'." All right, so then everybody went home, and a couple weeks go by. They got another call on October 3rd, 1961. It was decided to do a do-over of the recording, more professional, with probably some background, professional musicians. And they re-recorded "Surfin'" on October 3rd, 1961, again at World Pacific Studio. Then a month goes by, and Murray announces that he signed a contract with Candix Records and Herb Newman, and that "Surfin' would be made into a single and released on the radio, like through the Masonic eye of CBS, right? Because that's Columbia Records. And everything pretty much rolls up into Columbia Records or EMI or RCA Records, but Columbia Records was sort of the big player at that time. They had a contract with Doris Day, they had a contract with Paul Revere and the Raiders, they had a contract with Doris Day's son Terry Melcher. They kept him employed as a so-called producer after they didn't like his recordings. They started him out as a singer, and then you'll notice that in Hollywood music industry, they'll find a home for you somewhere, like Frank Zappa. He doesn't really have any popular, commercially successful music, and yet he had a 60-year career and appeared on every talk show, always commenting on the record business, when in fact he didn't really have any hit records. So that's, he's a social engineer, and they found a home for him because they cover all aspects of a psychops. ABC, all bases covered. All right, so everyone was excited. I'm sure Brian was excited having written "Surfin'," and so they are surprised, though, that when their song hits the radio, they learn that they're introduced as the Beach Boys when they thought that they were the Pendletones. So somewhere, the old switcheroo, like over there at the Magic Castle and at the Academy Awards Dolby Theater, which, by the way, is in close proximity to the World Pacific Studio, and also Gold Star Studios, where Charlie Manson spent 8 hours with the Wrecking Crew recording all-day session. Again, very close proximity to the Magic Castle and the Dolby Theater. And they like to do the old switcheroo. And so here you have this young, teenage kids that produce surfing, and they are known as the Pendletones, and they have performed at Hawthorne High School as the Pendletones, and yet when they hit the radio, they become the Beach Boys. So Herb Newman pulled a fast one. But anyway, they still got some pay. They paid Murray as the general manager, and then Murray was supposed to maybe pass some of that money along to Brian, Carl, and Dennis, Mike Love, and Al Jardine. But that was the beginning of a constant source of problems with Murray Wilson managing the Beach Boys, which is now the Beach Boys. Started out as the Pendletones. Anyway, so then the raging 60s kick off, and of course we have the John Kennedy assassination, quickly followed by the debut of the Beatles in February 1964 to take our minds off the assassination of our president. And the Warren Commission hasn't come out yet, right? Which we all know that that's going to be blaming Lee Harvey Oswald, a CIA operative of 5 years, and he did it all by himself, acting alone, making $1.50 an hour in a school book depository when he was making $8.50 an hour working for a CIA Army intelligence film lab, Stouffville. Trying to remember the Stouffville camera film production. He was making 5 times more money there, and they gave him $5,000 worth of camera equipment and listening devices. So I think his salary was a lot higher at his CIA, gig at the to develop aerial spy photographs. So anyway, long story boring, we're off into the races of the raging 60s, and we had, the Summer of Love, that's going to be scheduled for June 1967. So we're a little ahead of that. And anyway, we get through all that, and don't forget that when you dive into these stories, I want to just stay on the facts of the case, which I'll get to in a second, but it's so easy to get off track because, the Manson family comes into this story, and babysitting Charlie Manson for almost a year using Terry Melcher, Greg Jacobson, and Dennis Wilson, who were known as the Golden Penetrators. I'll let you use your imagination about that. They were known as the Golden Penetrators in 1968, which is when Dennis Wilson was coming out of his first of many divorces. And I believe he had 5 divorces. I think he had 4 wives. We'll get into that in a second. So let me just tell you about the circumstances surrounding the Dennis Wilson mysterious death and why I think it is very mysterious, and that there's more to look into on that. And so all right, where to start? We're in the month of December 1983. 1983. It's December before Christmas, and Dennis Wilson is bouncing around. He's sleeping overnight on sailboats. He does have an apartment on Wilshire Boulevard, and but he doesn't always stay there overnight. He's on to his, I think, 5th marriage. This is very disturbing, people. I guess I better just go through his marriages real quick because you're just not going to believe it. So I have to dedicate a whole page to this. So at age 20, just right after they signed their record deal, a few years into it, On July 1965, Dennis Wilson, at age 20, marries Carol Unrot, and they produce one child. And they get divorced in January 1968, just in time for Dennis to join the Golden Penetrators with Doris Day's son, Terry Melcher, and Greg Jacobson, who are both producers for CBS, Columbia Records, and also represent Reprise and other labels. But everything rolls through Columbia Records, no matter who you think your label is. If you want your songs played on the radio, you're going to have to deal with just RCA and CBS, and I think that's it. Those are your choices. So, Carol Unrot and Dennis Wilson are married for 2.5 years. Then he becomes a bachelor again. And then the media wants you to believe that he rented 14400 Sunset Boulevard, which is the CBS-controlled Will Rogers political satirist estate. 5.88 acres, 13-room home, 5 bedrooms, an Olympic-sized swimming pool, maintenance gardens, housekeeping services, dairy deliveries of eggs and chocolate milk, daily deliveries from the Arden Farm Dairy, and that a 22-year-old Dennis Wilson, 23. He's 23 years old in January 1968. He signs a lease to rent a 6-acre estate property in Pacific Palisades, which is near the beach. And when he just got divorced from Carol Unrot, and he would typically be spending time in West Hollywood, down where the Whiskey A Go-Go is and where all the girls are, right? You get an apartment down there, or you could stay at the Beverly Hills Hilton or one of the bungalows in Beverly Hills. I mean, that would be much closer to the action. I mean, this address, the Will Rogers estate address, is 14 miles away from West Hollywood, where all the girls would be. So it's not appropriate for a 23-year-old man who's just getting a divorce, who wants to become part of the Golden Penetrators with Doris Day's son, Terry Melcher, and Greg Jacobson, who are the handlers for Charlie Manson, in case you didn't know that. And apparently Dennis Wilson, you would say he's a handler, except he's gone. He did 140 Beach Boys shows in 1968, and 35 of them were in continental Europe. So what I'm trying to tell you is, during the year of 1968, Dennis Wilson is not really spending much time in Los Angeles. So he's not spending any time with Charlie Manson. He probably saw him a couple of times, but he has gone throughout the United States of America, staying in hotels, performing music. Now, Brian Wilson, the older brother, he doesn't go on tour. He stays home, and he lives in his home on Bellagio Road in Bel Air. Brian Wilson. He lived at 10452 Bellagio Road, which is 1.4 miles from Art Linkletter. It's 0.3 of a mile from Elvis Presley's home, a home that he lived in 1966. 1962 to 1966, Elvis lived in close proximity to Brian Wilson. And then Elvis Presley moved closer to Art Linkletter on 10550 Rocca Place. And then in 1967, Elvis Presley moved to 1174 Hillcrest Road in Beverly Hills, which is where he resided when the Sharon Tate murders happened. Elvis lived in the Truesdale Estates between 1967 and 1973. That's when the Manson family was hatched by CBS television studios, because if you watch my videos, you know there was no such thing as a Manson family in real life. Completely contrived for television and newspapers. There never was a Manson family. There never was any murder committed by any member of a so-called television family. It's like saying that Shirley Cassidy, murdered somebody. Wasn't she the mother of the Partridge Family? It's like saying Jed Clampett or Buddy Ebsen, he did the murders because he lived at 750 Bel Air Road, right? I mean, it's walking distance to the murder scene. Why not blame somebody that lived in close proximity? Why blame a homeless man? That's what they did. So after Carol Unrot is divorced, then we have 2 years of bachelordom for Dennis Wilson, and then we get past the Sharon Tate murder, and he doesn't waste much time. I guess once Dennis Wilson is assured that he will not have to take the witness stand at the murder trial, he marries Barbara Sharon in August 1970. I mean, that's just 1 month into the Manson trial, and there's Dennis Wilson getting into his second marriage. Now, that marriage lasts 4 years. Congratulations. They have 2 children. He has 1 child with Kara Unrot. He has 2 children with Barbara Sharon. Then they get divorced. Then I happened to go to a Beach Boys Chicago concert, Day on the Green, in 1975, summer of 1975, where Robert Lamb, who is the leader of the Chicago band, and Brian Wilson, who's the quasi-founder of the Beach Boys, I saw them both on stage together for the encore performance. Chicago opened, played solo, then Beach Boys played second, solo. Then for encore performances, both bands came on stage and played together concurrently. It was magnificent. It was spectacular. But little did I know that Robert Lamb, the leader of the Chicago band, had been married and divorced to a woman by the name of Karen. And Karen was from Indianapolis, Indiana, and was married to Robert Lamb for a grand total of 9 months, 1970 to 1971. And supposedly, that was a very short marriage, and Robert Lamb went on to get married 3 more times. So Robert Lamb had four marriages, and his first marriage was to this Karen, who became Karen Lamb and took his name, and she moved to Playa del Rey. Now you should know that that's right there, Playa del Rey. That's that's right where the Anne Heche last sighting was. That's where Phil Hartman went to high school there. It's in close proximity to the Santa Monica Community College. It's known as Silicon Beach. Playa del Rey is known as Silicon Beach because of all the aerospace electronics firms that have operations in the Culver City area, because it's close to LAX, the Los Angeles airport. That's where the aerospace technology has a lot of electronics companies. Right there, right where the Anne Heche fiery car crash was. Right there where the New Road School is. Right there where the MGM Studios, now Sony Pictures Studios, is. Right where Dorothy Stratton was murdered. Right where Sharon Tate signed her deal with the devil. Right there. Playa del Rey. And that's where Karen Lamb, the former wife of Robert Lamb of Chicago, lived. And then she becomes the third wife. She becomes the third wife of Dennis Wilson, and they're married for a grand total of 1 year and 4 months, from May 1976 to September 1977. Then they get divorced. Then there's a little pause, and it's not long before it's decided that Karen Lamb and Dennis Wilson should get remarried a second time. So they get remarried in July 1978, which is less than 1 year after they got divorced. It's 10 months after they're divorced. They get remarried. And this time they're married for 1 year and 1 year and 10 months the second time. So again, similar length. And they are married July 1978, and they're divorced in May 1980. Right around the time Dorothy Stratton gets murdered, Karen Lamb and Dennis Wilson get divorced for the second time. So now Dennis Wilson's been married and divorced from Carol Unrot, married and divorced from Barbara Sharon, married and divorced from Karen Lamb twice. So then what happens? Well, he has eyes on Mike Love. Remember Mike Love? He's the cousin that was in the Beach Boys. And of course, Mike Love has 6 wives. He's burned through 6 wives. And he had children with several of the wives. And he had a child with Mike Love's second wife, I believe. I believe it was Mike Love's second wife. He had a daughter by the name of Shawn Marie Love. Shawn Marie Love. Okay. And Shawn Marie Love was babysat by Susan Atkins and Charlie Manson and Patricia Krenwinkel at that alleged Dennis Wilson's property, which he never lived in, 14400 Sunset Boulevard. Mike Love used to bring his daughter, Shawn Marie, over to the pool during the summer of 1968, and Susan Atkins, who was pregnant at the time, and Patricia Krenwinkel and Charlie Manson babysat Shawn Marie at the swimming pool in 1968. And to give you some idea of how old she was about 5 years old. She's 4 to 5 years old. Anyway, that becomes the fifth wife of Dennis Wilson. Yeah, he marries her at age 19. Okay? But I believe he'd been dating her. He'd been living with her for 3 years, since she was 16 years old. So you don't think this isn't fit into the Peter Bogdanovich category of creepy? You got Dennis Wilson, who's 36 years old, and he's living with a 16-year-old daughter of his first cousin, Mike Love, the lead singer of the Beach Boys. Mike Love. I'm just telling you, this is the situation. And he married Shawn Marie Love on July 28, 1983. And he was married to her when he mysteriously drowned on December 28, 1983, which would have made their marriage 5 months old. That was his last marriage. Okay, he's married to Carol Unrot, Barbara Sharon, Karen Lamb, Shawn Marie Love. That's 5. That's 5 marriages. That's 4 women. That's 4 women, 5 marriages. I'm not kidding. Okay? And the reason given for why Dennis Wilson was diving into the cold 59 degree temperature water at the Marina del Rey Marina. Who goes diving wearing cutoffs in December in the Pacific Ocean? It's 59 degrees. That means it's really cold. But the reason was that Dennis Wilson was diving in 12 feet deep water, searching for all of the things that Shawn Marie Love had thrown off of his 62-foot sailboat 3 years earlier, that had beautiful pictures of Karen Lamb and mementos from his previous marriages to these other 3 women. And I guess Shawn Marie Love decided to throw those overboard, and they sunk by this berth. And this is when Dennis Wilson befriended his next door neighbor in the Marina del Rey yacht club, whose name is Bill Oster, who had the big boat next door. Bill Oster's yacht is 52 feet long. Now, bear in mind that Dennis's was 62. So Dennis had the larger yacht. And so, you know, in sailing, a lot of times you have size kings, and they don't like to have the smallest boat in the harbor. But I'm telling you is that Bill Oster's yacht was 52 feet long, and Dennis Wilson's was 62 feet long. However, during the next couple of years, Brian Wilson's boat was repossessed due to a bankruptcy filing. And so he lost his boat, and then Bill Oster had the 52-foot boat, and they used to drink together and scheme as to how Dennis Wilson could repurchase his boat and get it back. You know, the 62-foot boat. But in the meanwhile, he lived on that boat, and he lived in apartments with Shawn Marie Love, the daughter of Mike Love. So you see what I'm saying is when I saw them in concert in 1975, I didn't realize that Dennis Wilson was probably flirting and dating Robert Lamb's ex-wife, and that he perhaps was flirting with his cousin Mike Love's daughter, Shawn Marie. But I kind of think that was what's going on. Anyway, he'd had at least 3 different dives. He's basically in cutoffs. He's not wearing a wetsuit. He's got a diver mask. And he's doing these, holding his breath, diving down 12 feet to look for mementos that were tossed overboard from his child bride, Shawn Marie Love. That's the story. But I'm here to tell you, you get hypothermia. I've personally gone swimming in the San Francisco Bay, and I think I did that in the spring, and it was unbelievably cold. And it appears that Dennis Wilson may have had alcohol in his system and perhaps cocaine and some other drug products. But I'm not really clear that it's a good idea to go diving in December in Marina del Rey in 59-degree temperatures. Now, in the days before that, before Christmas, Dennis had been checked into the St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica, nearby. It's very close by. You know, it's just a few miles away. St. John's Hospital for a detox program where he stayed for 3 days. And then on Christmas Day, you know, when everybody's celebrating, I guess Dennis checked himself out of the hospital and went over and stayed overnight with Bill Oster on his 52-foot yacht at Marina del Rey. So the story goes. You got to remember, the stories are not 100%. It's not clear on what the truth is. I'm just telling you the stories pieced together from People magazine and other things, and you know those have a lot of mendacities in them. So I'm doing the best I can, people. Anyway, so then apparently there was another intervention where Dennis went over to, there's a marina hospital that's walking distance from the marina. Gee, they could have taken Ann Heche there, don't you think, right? They didn't take her to UCLA. They didn't take her to the Marina Hospital. They didn't take her to St. John's in Santa Monica. No, they had to take Ann Heche all the way up to the Spawn Ranch in Canoga Park to the, Grossman Burn Center, a.k.a. Cosmetic Surgery Center. They take her 27 miles up there, and look at all the hospitals where the Ann Heche crime scene happened, right? You got St. John's, you got the Marina Hospital, you got UCLA. They're all within 3 to 5 miles. Why would you take her 27 miles up to almost Ventura County to the Spawn Ranch? Why would you do that? But of course, I think we know that it never happened, so you can tell whatever story you want, because Ann Heche never went to a hospital that we know of. All right, so anyway, what I'm trying to remind you is, people, Marina del Rey, this is a military industrial complex. It's part of Silicon Valley. It's where the electronics companies do business. It's where military intelligence is. It's where aerospace technology is. This is where the Beach Boys came out of. This is where Karen Lamb came out of, from Indianapolis to Playa del Rey. Marina del Rey is next door. This is where Harvey Levin is. This is where the Jesuit, Loyola Marymount University is. This is where MGM Studios was, Sony Pictures is. This is where Dorothy Stratton was killed. This is where the Ann Heche hoax happened. This is where the CIA drug dealing out of the Straight Satan's Clubhouse in Venice Beach was. This is where the Church of Synanon in Santa Monica was hatched. This is where the New Road School is home for Dakota Johnson. So you shouldn't be surprised that Dennis Wilson, was killed in this zip code. Lots of people get killed in this zip code. Anyway, the story is, after about 3 different dives, and now we get out to 4:15 p.m. in the afternoon, he goes in for his 4th dive, and he doesn't come up. So he had just visited with a guy named Lathy Morris, who's age 57. He lives on a houseboat right there, and he supposedly eyeballed Lathy Morris's 16-year-old granddaughter, and they talked for a brief moment. And Dennis Wilson also spoke with Skip Lady, who's 26 years old. He's the manager of the Marina del Rey yacht harbor. And of course, Bill Oster was there on his 52-foot boat where Dennis Wilson was staying and slept the night before. On December 27th, he slept on the Bill Oster yacht. So you have Skip Lady, Bill Oster, Lathy Morris, his granddaughter, and they all start looking and calling out for Dennis Wilson at 4:30, 4:25, 4:30. They're looking for him. And then a harbor patrol boat goes by. They wave him over. He organizes 4 divers. The divers get organized, start looking, and it's not until 5:30 p.m. that the divers find Dennis Wilson, and he's actually discovered right underneath the pier where Bill Oster's boat is mirrored. I mean, you'd think that'd be the first place they'd look, right? Is right underneath, because Dennis Wilson's yacht used to be on the other side of the pier of what's called the slip next to Bill Oster. Bill Oster's boat is called the Emerald. Dennis Wilson's boat was called the Harmony. Okay? And those two were neighbors in 1980. And that boat was home to Shawn Marie Love, who dumped all of the Love possessions from his former wives overboard at that slip. So that's where Dennis Wilson was diving. He was diving underneath the slip right by Bill Oster's boat. Why would it take so long? See, this is sort of like the La Bianca murder scene when their son Frank comes home and then he spends 3.5 hours eating hamburgers and French fries before he returns to his parents' home to discover their dead bodies. Why would you spend 3 hours at the hamburger place down the hill when you've already been on the property and the front door is unlocked? Why won't you just go in the house? Oh no. See, well, that's the situation here with Dennis Wilson. Is he's been missing since 4:15 p.m. December 28th, and his body isn't discovered until divers find it at 5:30. I mean, why couldn't Bill Oster just dive down? Or why couldn't Skip Leahy, who's 26 years old, he could dive down? Or Leahy Morris, age 57, he could have dove underneath the pier. But they don't. They don't. And so you're talking about an hour and 15 minutes go by. So that's 75 minutes from when Dennis Wilson was last seen to when his lifeless body is pulled up. All right, so that's the story of his death, right? There's so much more to this story, believe me. Besides the dysfunctional relationships with women and being called a golden penetrator during your 1 year of bachelordom, because it looked like Dennis Wilson liked being married or getting divorced. He was real busy marrying and divorcing women. I don't know how he had time to chase groupies, but there you go. When you look into the story, of course, you can't look away from Brian Wilson and his relationship with Eugene Landy. Oh my God, what a psychops that was. You should know that this is when that's going on. When Dennis Wilson is murder-suicided, accidental death, Brian Wilson is being moved out of his home, his 8,000 square foot home on Bellagio Road. He's being moved into Eugene, his psychologist, his psychotherapist. He's moving into his apartment in Santa Monica, while Eugene Landy is moving into Brian Wilson's mansion in Bel Air. And Eugene he goes from being a psychotherapist to becoming his executive producer, his business manager, his co-songwriter, his business advisor. So I'm going to say that Eugene worked for the CIA and that Tom Mullets, the Beach Boys manager, that he worked for the CIA, because it's pretty clear to me that they are controlling the eldest Wilson, Brian, the founder. He's totally controlled, and he's being medicated with amphetamines, barbiturates, and psychotropic drugs. And then you have Dennis, who's on cocaine and vodka, and he is diving into the water on December 28th, 1983. So during 1983, you have Brian Wilson totally controlled by his psychotherapist, who is not a medical doctor. He's a psychologist. And he actually doesn't have a license to prescribe drugs. And that's how they eventually got him off the case, was because he was prescribing drugs without a license. But anyway, you got Brian Wilson under control from a psychiatrist. Then you have Dennis Wilson, and he's being controlled by doctors over at the St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica, where he does a jailbreak and gets out, and he moves on to the boat with, Bill Oster, right? And he's married to a child bride, age 19, who's the daughter of his cousin, Mike Love. All right? Anyway, I just want to leave it there. There's so much more to this story. But, of course, there are so much similarities with this story and everything else we talk about. Dorothy Stratton, Ashley Ellerin, Sharon Tate, Abigail Folger, Cass Elliott, Natalie Wood. Didn't she die by being thrown off a boat at Catalina Island? Yeah. What was the name of that boat? Check it out. Check out the name of the boat. Robert Wagner, he's totally controlled, right? The skipper of that yacht, he was totally controlled, right? So, we could get into the Natalie Wood case, but who was living on the Natalie Wood property that the clandestine services set her up at? I think it's 7867 Woodrow Wilson Drive. Well, Cass Elliot was living there. Yeah, Cass Elliot. Remember her? And didn't she go bye-bye? Wasn't she murdered in England? Yeah, she was. And that's close proximity to where Abigail Folger lived at 2774 Woodstock Road, which is less than 1 mile from where the Natalie Wood Cass Elliot gated property was, which is the exact duplicate, really, of the Cielo Drive surveillance property. In other words, it's gated. It's for private events and parties. It's gated. And there are homes in close proximity that may have secret pathways. And it is a perfect place to conduct nefarious activities because it's totally private. And it's easy to surveil from certain places. All right. So Dennis Wilson, we can add him to the list. It's a mysterious disappearance, death, sort of kind of like Anne Heche, who disappeared in the, what do they call that, Mar Vista? It's the same place as Marina del Rey. It's close to Venice High School. Modern Family. It's close to Playa del Rey. It's close to Venice Beach. Thanks for listening. Please hit the like and subscribe. Have a great day.